Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Adam Interviews, where we are talking with folks in our community doing things of note. We've got a good one today, and we scheduled this knowing that you are probably in the same boat as we are, where you're just waiting for that next RG&E or National Grid bill to come in after this exceptionally cold stretch. We had to heat our homes, and the bill is not going to be fun to look at and even less fun to pay. In addition to that, we've seen businesses say we can't expand, municipalities saying we can't even accept new business because we can't get the power necessary to grow. So there's a lot of big issues happening across New York State and the country. And we were fortunate enough to find someone in our own backyard over at Cornell University who's an expert in energy infrastructure. His name is Rick Geddes, and he's joining us right now. Professor Geddes, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Great to be here, Adam.
I love the view over Cayuga Lake there in
Beautiful.
Ithaca. It is. So why don't we start off with this? Your take on where energy infrastructure is right now in New York State, the status and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So your introduction was spot on. I think for the first time in my life, we're actually in a situation where we're constrained in the amount of power that's available to meet demand. As some people say, in the state of New York, virtually every electron is spoken for. So we're producing as much as we can, and that's all being taken up by businesses, by stores, and by residences. And one thing, Adam, is as we've electrified more appliances and so forth, and vehicles are becoming more electrified, of course, that has increased the demand on the network for that power, and that is now at this capacity. So I think the situation that we're looking at now is how do we innovatively generate more capacity, get more capacity online, and how do we more effectively use the facilities that we do have, Adam?
Are you optimistic? I mean, we're going to talk about all the different ways we might be able to do that. Are you optimistic that we're going to be able to do it in time to meet the demand and the growth that people are clamoring for?
Yeah, it's a great question, Adam. So one mantra I think we should adopt is speed to power. So that's speed to power. How quickly can we get new generating capacity of multiple types online, so that it can begin servicing the load that we have in the state of New York. And one thing we should keep in mind, it might be obvious, but it's worth restating, is just how important energy is to our economy nowadays. Factories depend on it, office buildings depend on it. It has to be reliable, it has to be provided year-round. Our economy in the state of New York cannot grow without that. As you know, we have new tech companies like Micron just north of Syracuse coming online that are going to need a lot of power. So we have to be thinking about how to generate that additional power, not just at some point in the future, but pretty quickly. So speed to power. So I think, Adam, I'm optimistic that we can do this. There are new technologies coming along, I believe, that can help us better, more efficiently utilize the energy assets that we have now. But also some new generating technologies, I think that'll be very promising in the future.
I can't wait to hear about those. I guess I'll start with one suggestion coming out of Albany. Governor Kathy Hochul talking about in her budget the expansion of nuclear power, maybe smaller stations than we've seen in the past, smaller facilities. Your thoughts on that proposal and that technology?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Adam. They're called SMRs, or small modular reactors. And, you know, the United States, I guess, way back in the 70s, built reactors, and they were very different from one another. These will be sort of the McDonald's of reactors, where they'll be very similar. They'll be modular. Canada has recently licensed a number of these SMRs to add to their generating capacity. I think the United States should follow that. I think one challenge of that, Adam, is they're small. So, you know, we are going to need a lot of additional power. It's great to have the SMRs as part of the baseload capacity. Keep in mind, Adam, that once you sort of start the nuclear reactor, it's going. You know, so it's like hydro. It just keeps going. It's hard to turn that on and off. But that would be excellent, clean, once it's up and running, baseload power. I'm optimistic that there will be more developments in other types of reactors that will generate power reliably, but also safely, and probably, hopefully, at scale. I think that technology is going to take some time, so we have to think about strategies in the medium term to utilize the assets that we have to meet the demand. So for New York State, upstate New York, the city, et cetera, to grow, we have to keep in mind how important it is to meet the demand.
So what are some suggestions?
Yeah, it's great. So one of the things, Adam, is that's important in electricity is peaking. And so of course, the grid people want to meet all demand at all times of the year. And as you know, we've just had a cold snap where the demand, it's so cold, people are turning on extra heat, electric heaters, the demand for electricity goes up. Also, of course, it gets hot here in the summer and people turn on their air conditioning. And so the utilities keep peaking power on hand. And oftentimes that could be natural gas, it could be sometimes diesel, other types of generators that are used for peaking. Now, one thing that's happening, Adam, that I think is a really interesting development is improvements in battery technology. And just to be clear, these are not batteries that you put in your flashlight. These are batteries that are the size of a tractor trailer or several tractor trailers. And the batteries are really helpful and the cost of batteries has come down a lot over the past 10 years because you can plan ahead for when it's going to be very cold or very hot, and you can store power in those batteries for those days that are extremely cold or extremely hot when there's added load on the system, using your generating capacity, say at night when there's not a lot of demand or any other off-peak times. So I think one thing we should carefully look at in the state of New York is wider distribution of this new battery technology, which has come down in cost, and I'm told there's new technologies in the battery area as well that are going to continue to help lower those costs. So I think that's one strategy we can look at without adding expensive and often not as clean peaking power. So we can look at technologies like that.
I love it. Why don't we step back and we talked about the bills at the top of the conversation here. Why, I suppose, we kind of just take the answer for granted, but why is energy costs going up so much? Why are our bills increasing at such a drastic rate right now?
Well, as an economist, Adam, I'm going to say it's supply and demand. Like I said, for most of the course of my lifetime, we've had extra power. For peaking, the utilities were able to meet all demand. Now we're seeing demand go up from just standard, industrial, residential, and commercial customers. But if you add to that some of the tech, some of the data centers, the semiconductor fabrication facilities, the demand on the grid is just going to keep going up. There's different fuels in the base load that might be adding to that, but I think we need to keep that in mind. And of course, as an economist, I would like supply to respond to that. I don't want us to continue to be power constrained because that's just going to limit our growth. But to use innovative, I think nuclear powers. One, we can talk about geothermal power. It's exploratory at this point, but I think is a very promising source of power, and other sources that I think can meet that demand.
Speaking of other sources, a few years ago, I went down to Pennsylvania to do a story on fracking. A lot of people were calling on that as the cure, or at least temporarily, for this shortage. Is that still an option? What are your thoughts on that technology and that source of energy?
Well, so when you talk about fracking, Adam, I associate that with natural gas extraction.
Yeah, exactly.
And we still have natural gas, in the state of New York, and we are on Marcellus Shale, sitting here now, as I'm sure you know. It's pretty deep, so we do have that. But when you talk about that technology of drilling, so let's talk about that for a minute, because it's the innovations in drilling technology recently are amazing, where you can go down and then turn to a horizontal, and you can really direct the drilling. And oftentimes that, as you said, fracking is associated with natural gas extraction. But I think one of the things we really need to think hard about and to put some research money into is this notion of what we call at Cornell earth source heating. And we are pioneers in that we have the Cornell University Borehole Observatory, which is 10,000 feet straight down, so pretty deep well to measure temperatures and characteristics at depth. And the idea of having the Cornell Borehole Observatory is to explore earth source heating, where you wouldn't frack for natural gas, but you would drill deep in order to extract heat from the earth. So if you stop and think about it, the core of the earth, or deep down where we're sitting, is a continuous, stable, reliable source of energy. So if we can figure out a way to extract that energy from the earth, to transfer that heat, is basically all you're doing with an intake well and an offtake well, transferring that heat that is at depth where we sit, that could be a tremendous source of energy over time. It's not commercially ready now. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. And also where we are, Adam, is deep. If we were sitting in, say, Nevada or Arizona, something like that, the geothermal is much closer to the surface. So it depends on the geology of the area. But I think techniques like that, so new types of generating capacity, that we haven't fully explored, I think that's something. Now it's longer term, and we have to think about medium term solutions, which I'm suggesting is the battery technology could help with that in the medium term. But we need to keep pushing hard on developing these new generating sources.
My neighbor actually got geothermal last year and seems rather happy with that. And you mentioned Nevada or Arizona, where getting solar energy, sometimes a little easier than up here, but a lot of people have solar panels. Are these things, geothermal, solar, is it economical at this point for people to consider that for their homes if they get the right amount of sun or they have room for geothermal?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how geothermal, I'd have to look at the numbers more. What you're talking about is, of course, shallow geothermal.
Imagine,
I'm talking about almost 2 miles straight down.
Yeah, no, I don't think you went 2 miles down.
A lot. What you're talking about is a heat pump, heat transfer kind of a thing that is, relatively shallow. And I do believe, from what I've seen, that those are economical technologies. I'm sort of, at this point, realizing how constrained we are in the state of New York for the demand. And what we're talking about here, Adam, is electrons. So what you're paying for when you pay your electricity bill is electrons to keep your lights on and your heat on and to plug in your laptop and everything else. So we're electron constrained at this point. And I think if this continues, it could cause real economic problems. So I'm sort of an all of the above kind of guy. I believe we need to be exploring ways to improve solar power in the United States. Cornell has moved in the direction of having large solar arrays not far from campus in an attempt to make our campus more climate friendly. I believe that could be distributed throughout the state, that we could do more in improving the efficiency of that. But I also want to push that we should be putting research money into these new types of larger scale nuclear plants. They could be modular in that they're all the same, but they're going to have to be providing more baseload capacity, as well as geothermal, as well as solar. So and making natural gas turbines more efficient. All these things, you can get more power out of one unit of energy as you improve the efficiency of things like natural gas turbines. So I believe that all of the above, if we really want to develop, and I really hope to see, upstate New York become another sort of tech hub area. As you know, we do have that history with a whole lot of tech companies in upstate New York, and I think that can be realized once again. But it's going to require power, and it's going to require a lot of reliable power. So when you ask me about one generating type, my answer is going to be yes. I believe in all of the above.
We are seeing at the federal level, the reduction of environmental regulations, will that help this cause, do you think, in that it will allow for more, let's say, drilling, more use of natural gas because there's no longer going to be perhaps limits on CO2 or something like that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of issues there, Adam. One thing you're talking about is environmental permitting, and that's the National Environmental Policy Act of 1970, which was a small bill when it was passed in 1970, has grown to be enormous. And I think both sides of the aisle now have realized that that process, which we call the NEPA process, the Environmental Permitting Act, which could include a whole bunch of things: Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Native American burial grounds, a whole bunch of clearances have to be given before any project can proceed, has become quite cumbersome. It can take 4 or 5 years to go through the environmental permitting process in the United States. And I believe that there is now bipartisan interest in keeping, respecting the environment, protecting the environment, but also making sure that projects are not unduly delayed. Because it sounds campy, Adam, but I know in infrastructure it really is true that time is money. If you delay a project, costs never go down. They always go up, almost all your costs of delivering the project. So we end up with delayed delivery, slow delivery in the United States, but also very expensive delivery of projects. And I think reforming that permitting process, but also being careful, about a whole bunch of concerns of endangered species and wetlands, it goes on, about project delivery, I think we can do it. And I think that would help improve the speed with which all these technologies would be delivered.
In addition, and you kind of talked about the delivery and open the door for the infrastructure. Just, it's one thing to generate the power; it's another to get the power to these places. And you have RG&E locally talking about how they sometimes can't afford to invest in this transformer here, or this hub here, and then the municipality sometimes comes through, the state comes through. What's the relationship here? Who should be paying for this?
Well, inevitably, it is ratepayers who pay. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes if rates don't go up, but that cost is imposed on the utility, that's providing the power, that's going to be reflected in the share price of the utility, and that's a matter for the PUC, the Public Utility Commission, would be deciding on how much rates would respond. But I think you raised a really important point there, Adam, which one thing is, in addition to the permitting that you mentioned, is if you do get new generating capacity, just how long it takes to connect to the grid in the state of New York. Now you can say, we'll build solar, you mentioned solar panels. So suppose we have a solar array which has a whole lot of panels in it, producing a lot of power, and you might say, well, let's get that on the grid. Let's get that power available to customers. But because of the nature of the grid in the state of New York, which we know is old, and other factors, it can take 4 or 5 years just to connect that generating facility to the grid. So I think that we need policies that are going to, again, expedite that process. We have to, of course, maintain the grid carefully to ensure reliability, but we need to think about how we can expedite the process of getting these new forms of generating capacity available to customers.
Interesting. I'm hearing in this conversation that not necessarily, if you want to use the word deregulation, but rather a change in regulation in order to expedite the generation of energy and the transfer of energy. One quick aside here that I just thought of is we're hearing a lot of criticism of wind energy from the White House. Is there legitimate concern about wind energy? Is it not worth the price?
It's a good question, Adam, and I think people I've talked to who have much more engineering training than I do say it's useful to think about wind as two sectors. There's offshore wind and onshore wind, and those two things are very different. They have different costs. There's different engineering issues that come up if it's offshore wind versus onshore wind. And so you'd have to look at look at those two things as separate. And I would want to see how each one pencils out. My sense is that other renewables like solar might be a little bit they're more modular, they're more adaptable to a farmland and so forth. But I don't claim to be expert on the economics of wind power. But one thing we should really cover here, Adam, is related to a point you brought up before, is the nature of the technologies has changed so much in power. When I first started studying this decades ago, you could talk about a hub and spoke system where at the center of the hub you had a giant generating plant. And back in the day, it could have been coal, it could have been nuclear, whatever the source was. And then you would have transmission lines transmitting the power, and then for local communities, distribution stations that would bring the voltage of the power down. And today, the technology has changed where we can produce power in an efficient way, but the scale is smaller. So like a wind farm, for example, would be distributed, and we call it a distributed network, so that you have more distributed sources of power rather than this hub and spoke. And that's important because I think it's changing the nature of regulation, where you used to say, oh, we're going to add a big generating plant to the base load, and we're going to go to the public utility, and they're going to have to work that into the rates so that the rates reflect the return that the utility needs on that baseload power. Now we're seeing, we kind of call it a mesh network, where you're seeing these different generating sources that are more distributed, and that's sort of changing the way we're thinking about rate of return regulation and the way that utility regulation electricity has worked for decades. So it's useful for people to think about that change in the economic structure of electric generation and how that's affecting the policies. I think there's one upside to that, where I think it makes the network more resilient when you have these distributed smaller sources of generating capacity, and your point about the small modular reactors fits into that. But we need to adapt to that pretty quickly, and as I said, I think we need to scale up these different sources of generating capacity pretty quickly. That speed to power issue is very important if we want the state to continue to grow.
From your vantage point, I don't know how closely you follow it, but would you consider the Public Service Commission, the PSC, a good oversight body? I think we get emails in, people saying my rates went up, and it feels like whenever any of these utility companies goes to the state and says, oh, we need to increase it, the state might say, okay, knock it down a little bit, but you're good to go. Let's increase the rates. I mean, are they rubber stamping things? What's that relationship like between the state through PSC and utility companies?
I think actually, it's always challenging because, and we could talk about the economic nature of electricity, traditionally been thought of as what's called a natural monopoly, which is in the economics is a bit of a strange term. But the idea is that the monopoly nature of electricity is driven by the technology of production. That is, as opposed to most industries where we want firms to be competing against each other, in electricity, the idea is one big firm. The bigger the firm, the better, because it can produce at scale. But as we know from basic economics, if you have one firm in the industry and you don't have any policies to address it, that firm will act like a monopolist. And so you need that firm to be regulated. In the United States, we do something called ROR, which is rate of return regulation. And that has been the tradition across states. So the Public Service Commission in the state really has a difficult job, I think. Now, one thing that has happened we should recognize, Adam, is New York State was actually a pioneer in setting up this wholesale power network under what's called an ISO, or an independent system operator. And the Public Utility Commission was involved in the development of that market, not retail, but for wholesale power. And I believe that and a lot of other states have, and independent system operators can cross state lines. And I believe that the creation of these wholesale power markets has helped to keep the rates lower than they otherwise would be. I know people are concerned about their power bills, but you have to realize that the Public Utility Commission in the state of New York, the New York Public Service Commission, has a very difficult job. And as you know, the grid in the state is old. A lot of our generating capacity is old. And so they've had to sort of thread the needle, if you will. But I do think they've done a number of good things on the policy front. So I applaud them for that.
Interesting. When it comes to the generation of power locally, can municipalities do anything? We talk about, let me step back and take it away from municipalities. When it comes to these data centers and AI, before I talk about what they can do to help out, why don't we talk about the drain that they have? Some people are painting them as the main culprit here. Is that the case?
Well, they certainly add to the demand for power. So just to be clear, if you're talking about installing a data center, I study infrastructure. So there's two main types of infrastructure that are needed to support that data center. One is, as you suggested, a lot of power, but you also need a lot of water for cooling purposes. And that's, I think, why this site in Clay, New York, just north of Syracuse, was an ideal site for Micron to put in its semiconductor fabrication facility. So yes, I mean, they often come along and say, well, we need all this power to power the plant if we're doing a data center. And maybe the state is like our state and saying, wait a minute, we're already just able to meet the demand in the state because we've electrified a lot of vehicles, trucks, a lot of appliances. And like I said before, every electron is spoken for. So what we're seeing a lot of data centers, some data centers do, Adam, is come with their own generating capacity. So they're bringing in natural gas power, other sources of power sort of inside the fence that would power their own data center. I don't know that that's happened in the state of New York, but I know that's happening in other states. Because it's going to be, they're going to have to wait years to get authority from the grid to connect to the grid and take that power off the grid. But as demanders of power, just like everybody else, unless you increase supply, and demand, as we say in basic economics, shift to the right, you're going to see the price of electrons go up. So that's why I'm a fan of this all of the above sort of approach to generating capacity, but also intense exploration and research on these new forms of generation. Which is
happening in Cornell, at Cornell, and in our area. So
right.
We're cheering you on here as we try to heat our homes or cool our homes depending on the season.
We're doing our best, Adam.
Yeah, well, you can tell. So, Professor Geddes, I can't thank you enough. I could go on for an hour here, or 2 hours. I mean, I feel like I hit the payload connecting with you. So, expect another request to come on when we start the cooling process eventually. But thank you very much. It's been very helpful.
Happy to help, Adam. I'm a short call away.
All right, sounds good, and a not so long drive and a beautiful area. So, Professor Geddes with Cornell University talking to us, obviously very much in the know about the energy infrastructure that we have and what we need to do to increase the supply and the transfer of the energy, and so we can grow because the demand is there. People want to grow in the state of New York. Don't let anyone tell you differently. So it's a matter of making sure they have the power to do so. With that, thank you all so much for watching this episode of Adam Interviews. We will continue to deliver in-depth conversations on people, places, and issues. Take care, everyone.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.